with that, I would love to just give you a little bit of background of why we all wanted to hold this session together. It's because we really believe that this is a golden moment for youth engagement and youth transformation, because for many years, youth have wanted to engage, and now this call seems to have been heard, and there's a lot of buzz around youth and getting them involved and having events like this World Food Forum and really facilitating that engagement. And so we really, through this webinar, want to share the experience that's already been built up by some youth organizations so that even more youth can do this together with us or in your own organizations. And when you already have processes going in your own organizations, that maybe some of the things that we talk about here can help you improve your processes or change your processes, or even allow us to work together in the future. Because it's not only about collective policy position forming within our own organizations or youth groups, but also being able to make collaborations, form synergies, and really form coalitions around these policy issues that are really, really important to all of us. Because in the end, we are all struggling and all hoping that we have a better world tomorrow. And that's what youth are really engaging for. We also really want to avoid this youth tokenism that happens sometimes, where we have a beautiful youth face, but we lack that substantive policy platform behind us to really make those strong asks. And so we hope through these collective policy positions that we also gain more legitimacy in these processes and really have a lot of power behind these asks that youth are making, and also that we are already doing on the ground every day, that you'll see through these grassroots movements that are happening through Transfoodmation, what's happening on the ground in YPARD, and so many other youth organizations as well. So with that, I'm not sure if the polls are available, but if they are available, I would like to ask the technical team to put up the first poll, and that's to ask the participants what they are hoping to get out of this session today. And I don't see the poll going up. So instead, what we can do is have you all write in the chat or in the question and answer what you are hoping to get out of the session today. Yes, definitely. I see Pramisha wrote, please feel free to write in the chat. And I'll take a look at those and see what you all are hoping to get out of the session today. Because I explained a little bit about the background of what we were hoping for you to get out of the session. And we'd love to hear from you. We'd also love to hear from you what experience you already have forming participatory policy processes in your organization. Are you looking to really refine processes in your organization? Are you looking to learn how to do this? Or do you maybe just have general interest in forming collective policy positions? And this will be a good moment for me to also explain the rules of engagement for today. So anyone who would like to ask a question or make a comment, please feel free to write in the chat, and also to write in the question and answer session, because then later today, we will also have a short question and answer panel where you'll be able to directly ask questions to the panelists and they will be able to respond. So I see a response that says, an understanding on how participatory processes are created and a view on the ones that already exist. Fantastic. So this is for our panelists to keep in mind. And if you don't feel like you heard a certain aspect, please then put that question in the question and answer portion of the chat. Yeah, so I also see another comment. We're looking forward to being part of the youth action. So yeah, that's fantastic. This is why we are preceding also the Youth Action Assembly today, is that we start talking about how these processes can be formed in our youth community. Also see learning and sharing best practices with each other, definitely. So this is the message to you, our presenters, to really share your best practices with the audience today. And with that, then I would like to ask to advance the presentation to the next slide, to the agenda, please. I just explained a little bit the rules of engagement, and then I just quickly like to go over the agenda for today. So first, we will have a presentation from Ms. Pramisha about policy processes in youth constituencies of the UN space. Then we'll hear from Mr. Amin, starting a global social movement, successes, and also stumbling blocks that you might want to watch out for and learn from. And then our third presenter is Chiamo Dichabe, which we'll talk about bridging local views to national, regional, and global platforms. Then we'll have a time for questions and answers, and then we will have a discussion and closing. Unfortunately, today we won't have time for the teamwork in small groups, but we definitely have time for question and answer. And we are also always open to being in touch in other platforms as well. So with that, I would like to ask to advance to the next slide and introduce Ms. Pramisha for her presentation.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Jenna. Today, Mary Claire also should be here, but due to her personal issues, she cannot be here. So I'm covering both MGCY part and YOUNGO part today. We are sharing how a policy process works within the major group for children and youth and YOUNGO. We might not be perfect, but still, I think it is relevant to share how our process works and also to reflect back on among ourselves and how we could improve our process by viewing the other presenters. So can you please stop sharing screen, Amin, so that I can share my screen? Thank you very much. Okay, as I already said, today we are discussing about how different operations and policy mechanism work within these three spaces, and you might also be wondering what is this MGCY mean and what does this YOUNGO means, different abbreviation. So I'm explaining it in the subsequent slides. First, just to gain some background, in 1992, there was a UN Conference on Environment and Development where Agenda 21 and Rio Principles were adopted. And that conference gave a legitimacy to organize independent civil society constituencies at the UN level so that they can organize themselves and they can input their position or input their views in different policy processes within the United Nations. And this led to the formation of major group and other stakeholder systems. Currently, those major group and other stakeholder system contains 9 major groups and other groups within other stakeholders. Within that 9 major groups, children and youth is one of the major groups within that MGOS systems. So major group for children and youth is one of those 9 major groups. And we are mandated by certain branch of the General Assembly to participate in the follow-up and review process at the high-level political forum on sustainable development. High-level political forum is formed after sustainable development goals are adopted, and they are the annual process to review the sustainable development goals. And major group for children and youth has been mandate to independently engage member states, young people within those high-level political forum process. And how do we contribute? We contribute this by providing our own oral and written comments. But we also feel that rather than just contributing on behalf of children and youth, our voice will be much louder if we collaborate with all other major groups within the MGOS system, because we are stronger together. I don't know what happened to my screen. Okay. Yeah. So major group for children and youth advocates for our right to meaningful participation at the UN in different policy processes and other processes within the United Nations system. Currently, we have more than 6,500 member entities, and we have been in the space for 27 years. And up to this time, we have consulted over 1 billion young people and delivered 50 million plus intervention statements in different levels like General Assembly, High Level Political Forum, ECOSOC Youth Forum, and others. So how do we operate? There are organizing partners there will be 2 organizing partners who facilitate the major group for children and youth, and they oversee all the structures. And there is administrative team, and there are policy officers, which look upon the relevant working groups or relevant constituency. Overall, all the constituencies that operates within their own thematic goals or SDGs operate within the major group for children and youth, and policy officers look upon the relevant SDGs. For example, YOUNGO, which works within the SDG 3, is also one of the member of major group for children and youth. And SDG 2 constituency is also one of the member of major group for children and youth. Similarly, UNEP, MGCY, and other working groups which work on the relevant thematic areas are also under the major group for children and youth. So it is like an umbrella body which contains constituencies, and within those constituencies, different organizations and young individuals work together. So how do we work? We have certain lists of our work ethic, and our work should be participatory and consultative. And our work also should be mission-driven and professional. We aim to be innovative, synthesizing both the old and new ideas. Similarly, we strive to be equitable, respectful, and inclusive with anti-oppression principles and practices. All the decisions that is made within major group for children and youth is consensus-based, and we strive to be accountable, transparent, open. So these are the 4 areas that we work under. First, policy and advocacy, which is the main topic that we're discussing today. Similarly, capacity building, so that we can facilitate to teach the young people who don't know about the system to enhance their understanding, knowledge, and skills. Similarly, action, which is providing young people a platform for dialogue to create an evidence base for best practices. Similarly, knowledge and communications. For the policy and advocacy part, we facilitate the collective participation of young people in different formal and informal avenues of not just policy design, but also implementation, monitoring, follow-up, and review at all levels. So we have created our own definition. What is meaningful? What does meaningful youth engagement like? So first is based on the principles. It should be right-based and legally mandated. It should be self-organized, designated, well-resourced, and accountable. But what could be the barriers? First is individualization. Similarly, regressive normative framing, lack of resources, and changing engagement landscape for other non-state actors. And we strongly believe that meaningful youth engagement does not exist in vacuum or self-alone space. So there is a ladder of youth engagement that we have consulted. The first is we strive to reach to the ladder 8, like step 8, and which we believe that there should be young people's initiative, decisions made in partnership with adults in intergenerational level. And so similarly, young people's initiative and leadership should be taken in account. In the next step, there is adults initiative and joint decisions should be incorporated. And when you go in the later side of ladder, then there is no meaningful youth engagement. And so if we strive to come to more meaningful youth engagement and participated process, then we strive to go up in the later ladder. So basically, since our main mandate is high-level political forum, how do we contribute? First, we write position paper for a plenary session with a list of clear policy recommendations. Similarly, we also write position paper for different SDGs, like SDGs 1, 2, 3, and other SDGs. Depends on which SDGs is being reviewed in which year. And to do that, constituencies leaders take lead on this. For example, if SDG 2 is being reviewed, SDG 2 was reviewed in this year, 2021. And in that part, the constituency leader will consult with their working group, and then they find where are the blocks and like how do they contribute, and they do consultative working process within their own constituency, and then they get back to OP, and then they contribute. So each SDGs working group or each constituencies have their own mechanism on how to consult with their members or youth organizations, and but abiding by the rules of MGCY. Similarly, based on the position paper, MGCY members also contribute to the oral statement, and similarly, they also connect with member organizations from BNR countries. BNR means voluntary national reviews, and civil societies, youth organization also independently review the SDGs process, not just member states, but to make their member states accountable and to see if their member states are reviewing the SDGs correctly or not. Civil societies organizations also do that, and MGCY constituencies and member organizations also strive to connect with those organizations to build the synergy together. Similarly, we contribute by organizing unofficial events, official side events, youth blasts to build the capacity of young individuals and new organizations. Similarly, by contributing to the VNR labs and exhibitions. Now, that is the main mandate of MGCY that I talked about, but when it comes to the independent constituencies, as I already explained, constituency leaders take lead to facilitate any policy process. They consult with their constituencies, mainly through open document. They circulate the document where everyone can give inputs because it is easier today these ways. And also they do consultative meetings. It might not be the best way, but still we are doing this, and there might still need to be improvement. And we always do an open process, and formal communication is always through the email. Although we also use informal channels to communicate on a regular basis. And we don't, in most of the times, except some exceptions, we mainly do consensus-based decision-making process and tries to bring everyone on board rather than just going to majority voting process. So it is all about general how young people are engaged through the MGCY and what are the policy areas that MGCY contributes. Although YOUNGO is one of the member constituency within MGCY, YOUNGO also has its own. YOUNGO is one of the biggest constituencies within the MGCY, and it also has its own modus operandi, and it operates on its own. It is official children and youth constituency of the UN climate change process, or UNFCCC. UNFCCC denotes to United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which is the main United Nations bodies that contributes to the climate change negotiations or facilitates the climate change negotiations. So going back to the history, it also started from 1992. Rio Earth Summit, since Principle 21 identified 9 sectors, which includes children and youth. Similarly, in 2005, young people formally gathered in Montreal ahead of 11th Conference of Parties to make their voices heard as International Youth Climate Movement. Then in 2009, the UNFCCC Secretariat and member states within UNFCCC officially recognized youth as an observer constituencies, which have its formal and mandated space within the UNFCCC. Similarly, in 2011, they formalized and confirmed YOUNGO to represent as the formal voice of the children and youth in the UNFCCC process, which was a really good start. And then from 2011, we have been YOUNGO is being operating, and we also demand similar space within the food and agriculture space because it really gives us legitimacy to work. So YOUNGO focuses on the following areas like awareness, knowledge and capacity building, collaboration, youth action, and most importantly, policy, lobby, and advocacy. And the main aim is obviously climate positive and just society, empowered youth generation, and a UN where youth is sitting at the decision-making tables and is taken seriously. So within the UNFCCC space also, there are 9 civil society constituencies like farmers, business, researchers, trade unions, women and gender, environmental, and among them children and youth is the one. So within the UNFCCC process, within the YOUNGO process, it is also flat structure. There is no hierarchy. Every decision is guided by consensus-based process, and engaging entities have equal voice. Similarly, as I already said, this is the oldest and largest children and youth constituency to a body of the United Nations. Here, it works like there are focal points who act as a bridge between the UNFCCC process and the young people and youth organizations. Similarly, there is a global coordination team which facilitates the overall administrative works of the YOUNGO. And there are working groups like adaptation working group, agriculture working group, mitigation working group, climate finance working group, and other working groups. And individuals and organizations can freely join the YOUNGO. Up to now, there are more than 10,000 individuals being engaged in YOUNGO and more than 1,000 youth organizations and NGOs. As I already said, there are thematic working groups within different themes and also operational working group like Conference of Youth, Actions, Participations, and Communications. As I already said, the Global Coordination Team is a group of dedicated and experienced volunteers, which has no decision-making mandate and neutral, but provides oversight, facilitation, and support. And there are 2 focal points, one representing the Global North and one from the Global North and one from the Global South. But they also don't have any decision-making mandate, and this would stay neutral. They just have a role to liaise with the UNFCCC and the broader UN process. So how do policy team operates? So with the when conference of parties is the annual UN climate change negotiations conference where YOUNGO is actively involved, and that is the main platform for the YOUNGO to engage, but we also engage around the year. But during the conference of parties or COP, YOUNGO engaged through Spokes Council, where they organize daily morning Spokes Council. Similarly, they invite young people who are in that negotiations to join the working groups of YOUNGO. Similarly, they also organize coordination meetings with different governments and also other groups. We give intervention or speech in the different negotiation spaces, and we draft those interventions or those policy positions together, and we delegate one of the members to deliver that intervention. So it is actually an inclusive process. And also briefing and dialogues is being done. And after COP, similarly, we also follow negotiations as it is the main mandate, and also talk to the country negotiators, plan actions, engage in side events, and press conference. This is done during the COP, but all around the year, different working groups submit their policy position paper to the UNFCCC and other bodies. And to do that, it always coordinates with these working group members and youth organizations on a consultative-based process. YOUNGO and many constituencies work through a consensus-based decision-making process. I'm repeating it again and again. And we work through big constituencies like YOUNGO, work through smaller working groups, and each working group leads its own policy process. And they organize through inputs in common document and organize meetings to resolve those points of conflict or agreement and finalize it. Policy position submission is done all around the year, and also during Conference of Youth, which is annual conference organized before Conference of Parties. We submit global policy position paper. Similarly, each constituency also speak or coordinate with the relevant sister constituencies and member states to lobby and advocacy all around the year, and we regularly liaise with the relevant UN entity. So this is all about how MGCY and YOUNGO is working and how does our policy work operate. I don't know if I covered some of the part that you expected or not, but I tried my best. Thank you very much. Over to you, Jenna.
Thank you so much, Pramisha. I think I made some great notes as you were speaking, I think. And really what I took away from your presentation is that MGCY and YOUNGO first represent a fantastic opportunity to join forces for folks who really want to advocate for change in food and agricultural systems, who are youth, but also want to coordinate with other constituencies here. And so I really saw that common values really unite all your stakeholders. And I love this ladder model of youth engagement that can really be used by our organizations, but also policymakers going forward to think about how we are engaging youth. And really, I saw some great tools that you all are using to engage folks in these policy processes, right? So you're forming group policy positions. You're also holding talks with country representatives and also sister constituencies. And you're also holding press conferences to then promote those positions that you're putting forward. And so those are all tools that our organizations can also use either in coordination with your group or on our own. So thank you so much. Next, I would have the honor of giving the floor to Mr. Amin, who will present about a youth social movement, Bites of Transfoodmation, and how you might learn from the success stories and also some of the stumbling blocks that they have encountered on their road to global success. Hand it over to you, Amin.
Thank you so much, Jenna. I'm just sharing my screen. Can you just confirm if it's okay now?
Fantastic.
Perfect. So what I would like to share with you all is a story about how the Bites of Transfoodmation as a movement was shaped, and maybe the difference of this presentation to the one that you just saw from Pramisha is that I would like to focus more on the soul of this policy making procedures from the youth. And rather than talking about structures, talking about things that we all feel, things that we all understand without any knowledge, without any education required, the very, very deep and profound humane feelings. So this is the beginning of the story of how we connected. So if I want to take you back from the beginning, I can say that exactly last year, October 2020, the Bites of Transfoodmation was supposed to have their first event in Rome, and there were around 40 to 50 young people, all interested and enthusiastic in food systems and transforming food systems from various backgrounds to join together and start having an open dialogue in a safe space. But what happened was because of the pandemic, in the last minute, we had to cancel that. And these people, I have to tell you that none of these people are getting extra fund or anything. It's all voluntary kind of activism that we all wanted to connect with each other. And we were chosen based on a selective process by the coordinators. And this has been a process from day one. That is, our group is growing, our group is getting more diverse, our group is changing, some people are leaving, some people are being added. So it has all of this dynamics inside it. And yeah, finally we decided, okay, now that we cannot be there physically, let's start something online. And everything was like improvising. In the matter of a week or two, we decided that we want to be committed to still meeting each other, having a dialogue, although we couldn't meet physically. So we will keep having our own, let's say, webinars online. We start sharing to know more about each other, around 30, 40 people. And imagine for 7 to 8 months, we were having webinars every month, at least once a month, each lasting for 4 hours. So that will give you the message of commitment. If you want to stay in a webinar for 4 hours without getting paid and without, I don't know, any kind of endorsements or something, you know that there is something inside you that you are feeling something from the other people on the other side of the screen, and you want to keep being connected. So after this process of us working together, we created a document, a manifesto we can call it the political document, but for us is mainly the soul of our engagement, the soul of our discussions, that we created something that we will refer to whenever we forget what we are committed to. And whenever we want to take action, the manifesto is again the source of our actions, with all of the different lines and chapters that are there. Then this year in July, we finally entered Rome, and the same people that we were meeting each other from behind the screen for 7-8 months, we finally got to meet each other physically. From the first moment, we saw the energy, we saw the sparks that we really have all of this feeling in common, all of the dialogues that we were having online about food systems, about the issues that the food systems have. We learned about each other's, we learned about the differences that we have in each other's countries. We were meeting each other's realities, and while sharing this, of course, we just met each other, but I mean, online, we were already having these kind of discussions. So in the field, being divided in groups, working on different projects, we already faced a lot of conflicts that were coming from the realities that each single person was facing, coming from their own respective habitat. And while being in this group, while being there, we try to practice the dialogue among youth. We try to accept each other's differences while trying to make a progress, trying to make a change. So we were thinking of doing something constructive. And this was something that, I mean, this is a sentence that actually came out of our movement, that in this world, there is enough space for all of us. And all we need to do is to learn how to respect one another and be inclusive of all kind of ideas and beliefs. So this is something that we all felt together, because as I mentioned, we were there with different realities, and but we knew that we are here to make something constructive. We're not going to, let's say, we're not going to cultivate cancel culture. We are here for something positive. We are here to create something that is going to make a progress. We are not trying to stop, but like, let's say, if we want to make examples, we can talk about our policymakers that all the time try to be criticizing each other. I mean, criticizing is mandatory for improvement, to see the voids and trying to find the way to go forward. But I think nowadays, the old school policy making is so much about criticizing. It's so much about stopping each other from improving and saying that, no, this is wrong, rather than giving us a solution. So as youth, we thought we want to seed this we want to see this mentality among us and try to grow this and go forward. So as I said, we did face a lot of obstacles, but for being young in the soul, I would say it's nothing about the body, it's just about the soul and mind. For being young, we thought, okay, we are present, we are conscious of where we are and who we are, and we understand that if you want to have an open dialogue and respect each other, you have to be able to see the division between your own mind and what you are sharing, all of the words, the policies, whatever is a concern of you in your reality about food systems, that those are only your concerns. But deep down, we are still human. So we came together, we circled around, we tried to, let's say, we try to brush away every kind of tension that was coming out of dialogues and try to reconnect again. Reconnect in our different sessions with the guide of the people that we had there, the permanent representative of Switzerland, to the Rome-based agencies, Mr. Pio Vanubst and Federica Frediani from University of Università Svizzera Italiana. So they were our, let's say, I would say our guiding lights. They were guiding our discussions, but not dictating to us, but not controlling us. They were just giving us guidance so we can take the discussions towards the flow that we want. Then, yeah, we focus our energy on what brings us together rather than what divides us. This is something that we all came upon, and we decided that this is the mentality that we want to have. This is This is the belief that we have, and this is the only way that we can have a constructive outcome out of this gathering. So when we see this kind of picture, you might see, okay, it had a happy ending and everything is finished, but we all knew that we were not there together to talk, to have dialogues, to think about projects, about concrete projects of how we can transform our food systems based on our capacities. But this was only the beginning of this movement. And after this, we all committed, and we committed to go forward and continue this going. So here I said, like, creating moments with passion and emotions brings a sense of ownership, and we commit to keep this fire burning. By this, I can refer to this picture. So these hats are basically with the logo of Bites of Transfoodmation. We started building this kind of sense of ownership, making a branding, but this branding, this is a symbol that behind it, it's very meaningful, it's very deep, it's all about this connection, it's all about personal commitment, it's all about collective energy, it's all about wanting to change the food systems respective of others, and having a collective consensus for what we want to do as a change. And well, I just tried to give you an image of the story of us, but I am more than happy to discuss much deeper with all the problems and issues that we had. And I also invite you to please join the movement, Bites of Transfoodmation. It's an open movement and inclusive, no matter where you're from and your background. If you are enthusiastic about food systems and you see there's something wrong and you can make a change, please, this is the right place for you to join. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amin. I really did take away, I think, a great soul of policy making, as you said at the beginning, that you set out to paint a picture of through your story here, right? So I heard really also about this journey of creating a common vision for the future. And that's really all based on this mutual respect for your fellow being and really a deep mutual love of your fellow being. So thank you so much. And thank you also so much for the invite to get involved. I'm sure some folks here who are listening in may be interested in that. And we also heard that call, of course, also from Pramisha for individuals, organizations to get involved as well. I think that one of the main messages I've gotten from both of you so far is that we really want people to join forces and put our positive energy towards something constructive for the future together. So thank you so much, Amin. Next.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Next, I would like to introduce our speaker, Chiamo, who is the country representative of YPARD Africa. And he will tell us a bit about working at policy levels at the local level and also the regional level and national level. So with that, I'd love to hand it over to you, Chiamo. And when you have the opportunity, you can also gladly put your video on. But if your internet connection doesn't allow that, of course, we all understand. So over to you, Chiamo.
Good day, everyone. Hi, Jenna. And thank you again for the platform. Excellent presentation by Amin and Pramisha. I think it also speaks to some of the work that we as YPARD South Africa has also been doing in terms of creating that inclusive approach in terms of policy development, ensuring that we get our young people to be involved when you look at your policy development, implementation and such. So my presentation is a quick one at a high level, just to indicate some of the work that YPARD South Africa has been doing in the past couple of years and our policy involvement and how best we can maybe get more young people and youth organizations to form that inclusive approach to policy development. So as we had indicated when we were doing the opening, the intention of this presentation is mainly to look at how do we build participatory policy positions and processes in youth organizations, and how do we ensure that as we build these policy positions, we are also creating a platform for inclusivity of implementation of some of these programs, but also ensuring that there's a clear institutional arrangement when you're implementing such policies. So we believe that youth are tomorrow's leaders today, and we need to look and shy away from speaking about the youth when we're developing policies and programs, but speak to the youth, to the heart of the youth. Because once we can do that, we are able to then ensure that they become owners and custodians of the policies that we are developing. And we need to ensure that this inclusive approach gives them that ownership as the leaders of tomorrow that are living today. They are able to take accountability and be accountable themselves about the policies that are being developed. We need to also start shying away from this top-down approach in policy development and policy implementation, but rather look at a bottom-up approach where the youth, who are the future of tomorrow, are the ones who are critically able to provide the inputs of what kind of future they want to see. So what Amin has been doing is exactly what we believe as YPARD South Africa, that young people should be the custodians of the policies that affect them, that affect their food security, that affect the security of their food systems, and they are the ones who will be living tomorrow and ensuring that they are able to feed themselves, feed their families, and feed their villages. So what we have looked into as YPARD South Africa, in partnership with a couple of institutions here in South Africa, including the universities network, including the farmer organizations network, it's a process that we call the Future Search model, where we believe that it's always with the youth, not about the youth. And if we ensure that it's always with the youth in mind and with the youth involved in policy development from the grassroots level, from the villages, from the rural areas, then they become the true custodians of the future that they want to create. And we say that the future search model is a constructive search for common ground and action, and that young people can be able to run with and have it at heart. So what we do through the future search process is that we recall the past. We look at the policies that didn't work, why they didn't work, what are the policies that worked, why did they work, and then we look at how do we combine such policies in the present. So we examine the present and understand that, for example, if there's water resources, if there's energy resources challenges, how do we look at those things and ensure that the programs and the policies that are developed will speak to the future scenario that we want to create. And through that, then we are able to identify common ground, common projects, and a common vision, which is what Bites for Transformation is also doing, creating that common vision, common ground, common projects that we are able to replicate in all the other continents and other spaces within within the holistic view of the policy development. And that then culminates into an action plan where young people have become the custodians of implementing that action plan. So some of the policies that we as YPARD South Africa have worked on include these policies that are set up here on the screen. From a regional level, we've worked very closely with the country pact and the regional country pacts for the implementation of the Comprehensive Africa Agricultural Development Program. And through that, it became an inclusive approach which was led by the universities, where we are able to bring in students and youth organizations to speak to this Comprehensive Africa Agricultural Development Program and become the custodians of such a program, understanding that as the heads of state had signed the Malabo protocols and the declarations signed, how do we cascade some of these policy positions that are at the continental level, at the United African Union level, at the NEPAD level, how do we cascade these to local ward level? We've also recently worked on the National Youth Policy of South Africa, where we had a consultative workshop with young people. And what we took out of this, the learning that we took out of this national youth policy is that the policy was drafted by an older generation, if I may put it that way. And they were speaking to the youth, but not, speaking about the youth in the policy, but not speaking to the heart of the youth in terms of the development of this policy. For example, when we had the consultative processes with the young people, it came about that one of the key aspects that was missing from this national youth policy was the issue of the fourth industrial revolution. And for us as young people, it is very important that they speak to the language that we are talking about. I mean, young people are now coding, they're looking, communicating electronically, virtually, and everything is moving towards this fourth industrial revolution. So when policies are being developed by an elder generation, if I may put it that way, and are speaking about the youth, but not to the youth, then the youth cannot be custodians of such a policy, which is planned to be implemented for the next 10 years. How do they then take ownership of such a policy? But one of the nicest of South Africa, where in South Africa currently we have a high level of unemployment rate. We're sitting at around 46% of unemployment in South Africa. And the policy of the Expanded Public Works program in itself, it had that inclusive approach where young people were able to voice out their concerns at ward level. And that is cascaded to the political championship within that municipality, then is cascaded up into the provincial structures through protocol agreements signed between the mayor of the city or the town and the provincial heads of that province. And then that is cascaded up to national, where the monitoring and evaluation and accountability is actually taken up at that highest level. And interventions and incentives are then put in place to ensure that our municipalities participate correctly in such a policy. So through the CADAP, we know that youth are an important partner and stakeholder when considering policy development. And it is important that this is at all levels of government, and their views are critical in policy development and processes. How do we do that? By firstly understanding the status of youth when implementing policy positions at local municipal level or at ward level. Then they become, as I said, owners of their futures and their destiny. Number two, we look at identifying opportunities and closing the gaps in implementing some of these policies. So it is very important that we have youth desks in each municipality at a local level, where young people, when they need intervention, they know exactly where to run to. When the municipalities or the provinces want to implement policies, they already know which constituency through the youth desk that they need to engage with. And that youth desk will then be able to bring in all the different youth stakeholders, youth organizations, and youth support structures under one roof and be able to speak to the policy that we are going to implement, for instance. Then number three is looking at the funding requirements towards effective implementation of policies within the provinces and districts. So incentivizing young organizations to form part of these consultative processes is very key. And it requires clear lobbying and advocacy work to be done so that youth organizations are funded correctly, to set up events, webinars, to set up consultative workshops, to set up learning platforms that will make sure that their voices are heard when the policies are developed from the scratch, not a top-down approach, but a bottom-up approach, as I indicated, which then brings that alignment of policy implementation to national priorities, such as job creation, poverty alleviation, and decreasing inequalities, which is, I think, not a South African scenario only, but this scenario is existing in a couple of continents of the world. So, as I indicated, through the National Youth Policy, it became very clear that we need to start shying away from the political heads, if I may put it that way, pushing down or shoving down policies down the young people's throat, but rather allowing young people to voice out their word, their frustration, their challenges, and that policies are developed from that perspective, not from a perspective of what the political leadership thinks young people want, but hearing what young people want and putting those kinds of things within the policies. So when we look at the EPWP program, for instance, at an institutional arrangement within municipalities, we had advised, as I was also a provincial technical advisor for implementation of this EPWP, we had advised that in all aspects of the institutional arrangement, young people need to be involved. For example, if the policy is going to be implemented by a unit, that unit should have young people involved in that unit. And from this, we then ensure that from the political championship within the mayor's office, there needs to be a young person also advising the mayor on what is it that the young people want to do. In terms of the administrative championship, the municipal manager or the city manager also has to have young people within their office to ensure when the implementation is being rolled out, strategic direction and monitoring is done by young people for young people. And within the steering committees as well for the implementation of policies and programs, we want to ensure that there's a forum, and the forum in itself will look at the strategic direction of the programs and the policy, the performance standards of the programs and the policy, the budget approval and the incentivization of such policies, reporting to the executive committee of the city, the town, the province, and then monitoring and evaluation, which is very key in ensuring that we are able to track the progress. So when we do a future search process, let's say after 5 years, you've got all the necessary documentation and you don't have to do research from scratch, but you're just consolidating, collating the information. And as such, then the young people become also the owners in terms of project management, and the responsibility becomes in the implementation, the design of the project, the systems that are required in terms of the processes of the policy, the coordination of the different spheres or sectors of that specific policy, but then also looking at the cross-cutting support systems in terms of the finance, the HR, the communication, and etc. So this is how we feel as YPARD South Africa that young people should be involved in the policy development, and they shouldn't be told about how the policy is going to work, but be the custodians of that policy. So thank you very much. I hope that was informative.
Thank you so much, Chiamo. I think I got 4 main points out of your presentation, right? That also you are working with your constituency to create a common vision for the future, which is something that I heard also from Bites of Transfoodmation, MGCY, and also YOUNGO. And then also this critical portion of really understanding the policies that are coming down the pipe from all these different levels. And then the third tenet of how can young people get involved. And then this very important point also of the institutional arrangement that young people need to be involved in. So thank you so much. Thank you
so much, Jenna. I hope this was informative, and I'll be waiting for the questions and from the platform, and hope I will be able to share more of how we were able to implement some of these policies on the ground. Some of them are working excellently, but some of them there's still challenges because, like I said, most of these policies are speaking about young people, but not speaking to young people, and young people's voices are not heard in some of these policy development processes. And that's something that as a world, we need to start shifting. We need to have a mindset shift and saying, how do we have this bottom-up approach that I indicated?
Definitely. I definitely think that that came through very strong through your presentation, that's something that you're advocating for, but also the other speakers, and I would advocate for as well, that young people need to be involved. The motto, never for us without us.
Yes, definitely. Thank you very much, Jenna.
Thank you. So with that, I'd like to thank the speakers again for their very informative and heartfelt presentations. And now, of course, I'd like to open up the opportunity for the participants to ask any questions that they might have. I've seen just a couple questions already in the chat. And so I'd like to invite the panelists, if they can, to go ahead and turn on their cameras again. And we can take about 10 minutes worth of questions here. And so the first question that I saw in the chat, I'm kind of reforming it into a question because I think it was meant as a question, was how do you seek policy support when you have project plans? And so if any of the speakers would like to field the question, just go ahead and unmute yourself. And if not, I will invite you to answer the question if you would like. So the question is, how do you seek policy support when you have concrete project plans?
I would like to ask, maybe.
Yes, please.
Sorry, answer this question on my own capacity. So this is something that we are also practicing in the Bites of Transfoodmation. We are trying to design projects as youth, as coming together by brainstorming and trying to share our experiences and coming up with some concrete projects that can make a change in transforming food systems. But of course, we will face the obstacles of how are we going to deliver this to policymakers, because some of the jobs, some of the things that we want to do in our project need some policy support as well. Like, let's say, just as an example, for instance, we would like to work on a project that is also promoting insect protein. But the problem that we have now is that in the EU, except 1 or 2 countries, insect protein is illegal. So how can we promote this? But on the other hand, we have like some animal protein that apart from any sort of, let's say, animal cruelty rights, like with all of the CO2 emissions, all of the detrimental effects that they have on the climate, they are legal, they are not taxed, but we're having problem with this. So how we think of connecting this is that one thing, there is a difference between the youth, with the current youth, and let's say the later generations, is that never ever in the history, until we know, we had access to this much knowledge, data, and I don't know, scientific papers open online. So what we think is maybe the most appropriate and peaceful way to do is, again, through negotiations and communication with the politicians, but with strong arguments. This is something that maybe if as youth we have with us the politicians, the older generations, which we have maybe a bitter relationship with because we have never been trusted as youth because of lack of experience or whatever. So I think having arguments, concrete arguments based on science, based on experience, based on data, this will leave nowadays, this will leave no point of not accepting. Of course, if you might bring an example of corrupted governments, that's a different way. Well, you can choose, I don't know, some revolutionary acts as youth. For instance, stop consuming meat. If you think that what you are trying to do is to reduce meat production and the politicians are against you, so what you can do is to commit, at least at a personal level. So there are always different levels to this commitment to make the politicians change. So it can, in some countries that the political environment is more open, you can do that in the form of a social movement, in social togetherness, collective energy. But in some places when it's more limited, more small, of course, you have to start as an individual, because I believe every drop counts. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I definitely think that your response also responded to a comment in the chat, was that young people also often face this credibility hurdle, right? And so I think that your response also addressed 2 ways or several ways that young people can address that, really use those strong arguments, bringing some of those data and known rhetorical arguments into our argumentation, and then also to commit at a personal level and also as groups of young people to show that we are really serious about it. And we're not only demanding change from others, but we're doing it ourselves, right? And we're leading the way. So I definitely think that's super valuable. I see, go ahead, Pramisha. I see that you would like to also respond. Yes.
Yeah, I can add something here, although Amin covered most of it, and I totally agree on it. And it also depends upon if you're the scale of your project and area of the project that it covers. So if the project is local level or it covers your community, then I think it would be of value if you go to your local government officials and youth organize among themselves in their community, and they come up with a strong argument of a project, and then go and speak to your regional or local leaders. And they might not listen for one time twice, but they will start listening to you if you keep on continuing advocating on the project. And then if it is a national level, if possible, try to go to the national government and speak, because communication is the key. And if it is anything related to intergovernmental process, then you can join the forces with the constituencies that are engaging with those intergovernmental process. And if anything does not work, we have a biggest power, that is social media. Start advocating about this on the social media, and then other youths will join the forces, and then your cause will be bigger. So basically, you can find, although there are many obstacles on it, you can find your own ways to advocate for it.
Super. Thank you so much, Pramisha. Yeah, I definitely think that, yeah, holding dialogue with policymakers and with other constituencies is definitely key. And definitely what I heard out of your answer is persistence is key, right? So using as many channels for communication as we have and using those consistently and over time is really key to delivering those messages. Thank you so much.
May I just add one sentence at the end of the remark, like what Pramisha just mentioned, is just about these youth movements and about, let's say, feeling that you're being put off by the politicians as youth and youth movements. I think if you need to focus on maybe your own mentality, your own individual energy as well, that imagine you want to make a difference, you want to negotiate with a politician that you know that will reject you as youth in any ways. I'm just imagining the worst case scenario. So if you know someone that is going to, let's say no 99% of the time to what you're going to ask for, so what are you going to lose if you ask the 100th time? It's the same thing. So keep trying, say it until they will change, but not say it in the same way. Try to make different details every time you're going with the same proposal, with the same question. That's all I wanted to add. Thank you.
No, I love that perspective on it, and it makes me just chuckle a little bit, because yeah, it is about just being true to your values, right? And there is a great amount of respect that others have for being true and consistent to your values. So with that, I see also a question in the chat that there is also an answer to from Chiamo, but I just love to give you the opportunity to answer verbally, because we also have the interpreters here with us. And the question is, how do you connect local processes with national and regional processes, and talking about some of those tools that you use?
Okay, thank you very much, Jenna. What we have found that works very well, for example, in the implementation of the policies we've worked on, was that as the policy was now being developed, there were clear protocol agreements that were signed between the national department with the provincial government. And then from those national department protocols, there was also secondary protocols signed between the provincial government and the mayors of the cities or the towns. From those, then protocols are also signed with the ward councillors in that specific city or town. So those protocols then creates sort of an accountability process, because once you sign those protocols, you're agreeing to implement the policy, you are agreeing to implement the programs that come with the policy. So it's always advantageous when you've got those protocol agreements signed for that specific policy between the mayoral committee of that city with the provincial government. From the provincial government, let's say a minister of agriculture in the province then signs a protocol agreements with the presidency to be accountable to ensuring that those policy positions will be implemented. That way, then there's clear accountability. You can even be able to set up clear targets of saying, for example, we want to create 50 young farmers in our province by 2020 or by 2025. Then you put those targets of 20 or 50 farmers by 2025 in the agreements. And yearly, you are able to then monitor how are these programs that are supporting farmers on the ground being rolled out. And that creates clear accountability, and you can even be able to take this to the constitutional court if they are not being implemented.
Super, thank you so much, Chiamo. I think so what I'm hearing from your response is really that you're following the different policy instruments also that connect the different levels of policy from the local to the regional to the national level. And so you can then follow those policy instruments and advocate for consistent language between them. And then also be able to follow up for accountability when and if those are held or not held as they are written.
100%. So then it also then gives a clear way to also incentivize those that are implementing the policies. You know, you can be able to lobby for incentives to say, if you are reaching specific targets of creating 50 farmers in 5 years, here as a municipality will incentivize you with tractors for those farmers, will incentivize you with inputs for farming. So then it creates also that inclusive approach to say, we want to be incentivized as a municipality, we want to be part of this program, because not only are our people gaining from the policy, but they are also, we as an institution are being rewarded for the good work that we are doing. So those then create a clear balance and it creates that inclusive approach.
Definitely, an inclusive approach is definitely key to all of these interventions, I think. I see in the question and answer, we have, I think, time for one more question. And Amin, I see that you're typing an answer. Would you like to go ahead and answer the question for the group? It says, all policymakers know about how important young leaders are, but just speaking about this is not a solution. It is a dream, not a path. So how do we pave this path?
I just wrote the answer, but I thought maybe I can talk about it. That, as I said, I'm always just thinking about, okay, whatever the critics are, whatever there's any, I don't know, negative vibe here, I'm just thinking about the positive, how we can find a solution. So here, Aida, what you mentioned, I totally agree with that, that this could be something that, this is something that will discourage the youth to continue their movement, because maybe some politicians do not trust them, do not give them the authority, they always block their processes. But what I always think is that there is always another side to the coin, and there is always a dark side and there is a bright side. So if this is what you're seeing, the bright side, you have to focus on what you didn't see in the dark side. That, okay, this is a process of, let's say, of policies that have been created in top-down approach, let's say the old classical policies in our contemporary era. But what we need now is bottom-up approaches coming from the communities, coming from the people. So instead of putting our energy and focus to convince politicians that we are saying the right thing, or we want to make a change, well, eventually, even if the politicians make a policy based on what you like and the community doesn't want to change, what can you do? You just have to put force, and that will just create conflict in the country. That will make more division. But if you want to go through an approach that actually is constructive, you have to start maybe your focus on the other side. Think about the communities, forget about the politicians. If you are able to empower, to empower the communities, empower the younger generations in the communities that don't have any ties to the politicians, this will give you some real trust. This will give you some real energy, some real support to move forward and make a change in the future. So this is basically what I would suggest, to put our focus on our communities, on given the situation that you have, or where the example you're talking about could be like giving the power to the youth in the rural areas or in the urban areas, doesn't matter, but giving sound or voice to those who are not being heard. Thank you.
Definitely. Yeah, I definitely think that change starts in communities. And I see that Chiama would like to also respond.
Yes, thank you, Jenna. I just like to go back and just to support what Amin is saying, based on this presentation that we had earlier on. Nice. And this for me speaks to exactly that what Amin has just been talking about. I'm not sure why this thing, yeah. So when you have a community that looks at a future search process, and maybe everyone can just do a bit of research on this future search model, because so far it has been working very well in South Africa and for the organizations that I'm working on. For example, recently we set up the Local Government Youth Development Forum. The forum in itself looks at the youth practitioners, but also has youth organizations and stakeholders, and all the government departments that are working towards youth involvement, they then form part of the forum. And this in itself becomes a critical tool to make sure that we take our politicians to account. Let's recall the past. What went wrong in the past? For example, in South Africa, we know that apartheid policy was a very wrong policy. It's one of those policies that you want to throw in the dustbin and flush it out in the toilet. But how do we make sure that in the present, we still don't use apartheid type of policies for excluding other races, for example, Afrikaners, who benefited back then, but if we're going to now exclude them, are we not re-implementing apartheid reversed? So it's very important then to have that inclusive approach to create that future scenario and come together to say, we as the people, this is what we want to see in the future. And these are the common grounds that we find ourselves in. South Africa is living under extreme poverty, high levels of unemployment, huge inequality gaps where the rich are richer, the poor are becoming poorer. But what is the action plan from this? How do we collaborate on working on programs and projects that will make sure that there's that inclusive wealth creation for the nation? So I would like to just agree with Amin to say, you just need to re-emphasize yourself, but have a position. You can't talk about such things without having a position or understanding where you come from, where you are, and where you want to go. Thank you so much.
Super, thank you, Chiamo. Yeah, I definitely think it's key to understand those past policy issues so that we can, make sure that we're continuing in a positive way forward and not repeating those mistakes of the past. And at an eye on the time, I will give Pramisha the floor and then make a quick closing.
Yeah, I totally agree with Amin and Chiamo on we need to create a movement in the community and come up with a stronger action plan and strong shared vision. But sometimes it comes to the point that we really need politicians to hear us, and we really need them to accelerate the change that we need. So I think in that situation, if they are not listening to us, we can join the forces with the youth allies. Especially in that space also, there are at least 1 or 2 people, 2 or 3 people who listen our voices meaningfully and who strongly support us. So I think if we join hands with them and if we start having real conversations with them, then we can leverage that communication and leverage that partnership to bring the change so that they can also speak with other people, their friends who don't think youth are the co-leaders, then it can create the movement. So it also starts with having a real clear communication who believes in you first, and then that amplifies your voices. That's all, Jenna.
Thank you so much, Pramisha. Yeah, I definitely think that this last call to unite as youth is so appropriate for the closing of this panel, right? Because this is what was the goal for the session today, is to share knowledge with each other about how we form these processes and learn from each other. And of course, I know the invitation is out there from each of you, and myself included, to reach out, to get involved, to participate, to join forces. And so that's really, I think, the key message, that there's a lot of empathy and human energy that we want to unite together to create positive change. And so with that, I'd like to thank all the participants who have tuned in today, who have listened, who wanted to learn more, who want to engage, because this is what it's really all about, is the community that wants to work together on these issues. So in about 30 minutes, the Youth Action Assembly is going to kick off of the World Food Forum, and you are heartily invited and heartily encouraged to take part. There will be simultaneous interpretation for these main sessions. So we are hoping to make it as accessible as possible. And it's really an opportunity for you to engage, to help really be part of that coalition forming that is aimed to happen through the World Food Forum, and really an opportunity to get your voices heard, shape that process how you want to see it. So take a 30-minute break, grab a coffee, grab a tea, grab a glass of water, and we look forward to seeing you in about 30 minutes back on this channel. Thank you so much to our panelists, and talk to you soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.